Welcome to Nature Sketch Crate's Ko'oloa Ula step-by-step painting instructions video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to use the Nature Sketch Crate step-by-step painting instructions to paint the Ko'oloa Ula. First, collect your materials and make sure they're ready to go. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and have fun. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. So place your transfer image onto your watercolor paper and line it up, and then put the tape on the top of the transfer image and tape it to the back of the watercolor paper. Go ahead and place your graphite transfer paper light side up, dark side down onto your watercolor paper and fold it down. Now you're ready to start transferring those lines. Go ahead and start anywhere you like. I like starting left to right. Transfer a couple of lines and then check to see that they are actually transferring and that they're transferring at the right darkness. So I like that. Just go ahead and go through and transfer all the lines by just drawing over all the lines. So just tracing the image with a medium pressure. Put on an audiobook or some music and just relax. And if you get interrupted halfway through or partway through or at any point, you can drop this and go and do something else and then come back to it when you're ready. You don't have to finish it all in one sitting. So go ahead and go through and transfer all the image lines. So once you think you have all the lines transferred, check it a few times. Just flip it up and down, looking at a certain spot to make sure that all the lines are there. I tend to miss a couple every time. And then if you like, this is a good time to add in the hole punch guidelines and the common name and scientific name if you'd like to add those. I'm going to go ahead and add those in. When writing the common name, the letters can be outlined, and then you can fill it in with when you add in your ink lines later. Now that all these lines are transferred, go ahead and remove your transfer paper and remove the tape from your image, watercolor paper, and transfer image. That didn't come off very clean, so I'm just going to throw that away. Usually I reuse it. But I will reuse this paper. This transfer image is great to protect your painting while you're painting. And use your kneaded eraser and knead it a little bit if it needs it. And remove some unwanted marks. I got quite a few unwanted marks. I probably put too much pressure from my hand onto the paper. Let me just remove a few there. But this is a sketch, so I'm not too worried about it all. Just remove it a little bit, clean it up. Rub it right over just gently. There we go. And when you're all done, you can move on to step 2. Step 2, paint in the wettest, lightest layer of ko'ola green, yellow, brown, and pink. First mix the ko'ola green. Take 1 drop 23H sap green. Make sure to mix it by shaking it. Sometimes the color pigment settles. 1 drop. And 3 drops of 1H Hansa yellow light. Mix that up as well. One, 2, 3. To your water brush and mix the color. Testing it on your paper. It's pretty dry. We're going to want a very wet color to paint in first. Be adding it to the leaves, the flower bud, sepal, the staminal column, stigmas, and the thin stems. And if you can't tell in the image in your step-by-step where to put it, you can always refer to your final reference image. Test this out again. Keep it really light to start. Watercolor, it's much easier to work from light to dark than to try to reverse any dark marks. So starting lighter, you can always add more. Looks good to me. Very, very wet. I'll start adding that in to all of those areas. You want to try to keep the edges wet to prevent any lines when the paint dries. Might create a line. That's fine too, because we'll be adding more paint, and lines in watercolor add character to your painting. So don't worry too much if you end up having unwanted lines from where the paint dried. And there I got outside the line because it's just a quick sketch. Next, we will mix the ko'ola yellow and paint it onto the inner petal edges and the center of the flower. Take 1 drop of the 1H Hansa yellow light. And 2 drops, that's fine because I'm not mixing it with anything. Just mean I have more paint here. So pull a little bit to the side so I don't have to add too much water onto my palette. And make sure that's really wet. Test it on my paper. And then add it into the inner petals just here in the center. Flower center. Now mix the ko'ola brown D and paint it onto the seed capsule and the main stem. The 24H burnt umber. One drop. And want that pretty wet too, and starting very light. And test that out on your strip. And add it to that seed capsule. and the thick stem. That's hairy stem, apparently. And as I'm filling these stems in, I see I forgot this tiny stem in here with some green. So I'm gonna clean out my brush, pick up a little bit of that green again, dab it on my towel, and then apply it. The last part of step 2 is to mix the Ko'oloa Ula pink and paint it onto the flower petals and stamen. So we'll take the 5H quinacridone magenta, shake it up to make sure it's well mixed, take 1 drop, add plenty of water, again starting very light and wet. I'll test that on my paper again. It's pretty concentrated. This is a very bright color, so pull some more away and add some more water. Dabbing it onto my towel and then applying it to the flower petals. And when you have that in, you can move on to step 3. You want to make sure the different parts dry before you add more paint. Step 3, add drier, darker layers of Ko'oloa Ula green, brown, and pink. Make sure you fill up your water brush whenever you need. Turn my paint palette around. And I'm going to want the drier of the 2 colors of the green. So let me get the one that's more concentrated or drier, has less water added to it. And I'm going to add it just like I see in step 3, in the image in step 3, just kind of around the lines. Looks like there's some inside too, but I'm going to start with the lines on all of them, and I'll just do a little bit more on the inside after that dries a little bit. And then on the lines of this leaf here as well. A little bit on the stem. And the flower bud. And this large leaf. And if it's hard to follow the small picture in step 3, just go ahead and refer to your final reference image. And pick up a little bit more of the bee, the Ko'oloa Ula green. Now that this is dry, just going, looks like it needs just a nice wash over it. So I'm just going to add another layer of that slightly darker green, dabbing it off onto my towel before applying it to my painting so that I don't get too much water onto my paper itself. And I'm just going to add that in different places, mostly the leaves. Just because I don't want to add it on the entire thing, but just different parts you can see in step 3. that are a little bit darker. And don't forget to dab it off onto your towel every time before applying it to your painting. So, next, I'm going to add a little bit of the Ko'ola Ula Brown F. My palette's getting a bit messy. And this is to add, make sure it's, can test it, make sure it's dark enough. If it's a little too wet, don't put any pressure on your brush. And dab it off into your towel and test it again. I'm just going to add a little bit more paint because it just got a little too wet. And I want it a little darker, so just take a tiny bit and add it without adding water to it. Mix it up. Try it out on my paper, and I like that. So that should be able to add a little bit of shading and definition, dabbing it onto my towel to make sure it's not too wet, so that I can control that paint a little bit better. If it's too wet, it's just going to go all over the place. Add it to branches, stems. Okay. And then I'm going to paint in another layer of the Ko'ola Ula pink. Get a little bit of that and test it out on my test strip. Let's use G, which is a slightly more concentrated color. And add it to the places that you see in step 3 in the image. Making sure to dab it off on your towel before applying it to the image itself. You want to let it dry and move on to step 4. Step 4, add a few more drier, darker Ko'ola Ula pink layers. So take a little bit more of the H Ko'ola Ula pink, and it's the drier, more concentrated color, so it has less water added to it, more paint pigment. And I'm going to add it as I see it in step 4, in the image in step 4. I can also refer to my final reference image if I need to. And I'll add as many layers as I need to get to that level of color, making sure to let it dry in between. Now this is dry, I'm just going to add a little wash over it, so a little bit of a medium layer color, not too much, so then you won't get that transparency. I put just a tiny bit too much. I just wanted it in some small spots here. Should have tested it out on my test strip first. That's okay. It's kind of in a darker area. I might have had more shadow and less light hitting it anyway. And this is sketch. And don't overthink it too much. Let this dry and move on to step 5. Step 5, add the 005 ink lines. Use the 005 black micron to add outlines, and you can do that referring to your final reference image and the image in step 5 and your transfer image as well. You also will have some of those transfer lines there that you can just draw right over with your ink and use it to add some light line details, stamen, and some on the flower petals, and to outline the common name and the scientific name as well. So I'm just going to go through and add all those lines. Now that all of the 005 ink lines are added, I can move on to step 6. Step 6, add more drier, darker Koaloa Ula green and brown layers as needed. Just make sure they dry in between layers. So I'm going to add a little bit more water, just a little bit, to my Koaloa Ula brown. And then before applying it to my painting, I'm going to dab it off onto my towel. And then I'll apply it to the painting as I see in step 6 and in my final reference image. Adding some deeper shading to give the image a little more definition. Then I rinsed off my brush on my towel with a little bit of water, and it's clean, so I'm getting a little bit of the Koaloa Ula green. I'm going to start adding that in as well. If this is still wet, just be careful. It's pretty dried on mine. Again, just referring to step 6 and the final reference image, and dabbing off onto my towel after picking up paint from my palette. Clean the paintbrush off. You can add a little bit of water. Move the ends of that wash you just put down, the dryer wash. Anytime you have too much water, just dab it onto your brush, or too much pigment. And go a little bit lighter. Pick up more paint. Let this dry and then add a little bit more. It's pretty dry. It doesn't take long as you don't use too much water. I like where that's at, so I am going to go ahead and Let it dry and move on to step 7. Step 7, add thicker ink lines. Use the 01 black micron to add lines to the flower as seen in the final reference image and in image A on step 7. We'll want to go ahead and write that scientific name, the smaller of the two names in the bottom. Trace over that one more time with my 01 micron. Then I'm going to go throughout and add just a few of the thicker lines, not the super thick ones, but kind of the medium thickness, as you can see in 7A. Once you've added all the 01 lines, go ahead and move on to the 08 micron pen. 08 micron pen, black. I'm going to use it to fill in the common name here and thicken some of the lines as seen in 7B and in my final reference image. And at any point you can go back and add more paint and ink lines. Just make sure that your paint dries in between layers. These pens are waterproof, so you can go back as many times as you like till you get this to the point that you like it. This is your sketch. You make it yours. I am going to use the 01 again to add a few more lines. When I was going through, I realized I want a few more right in here on these flower petals. They were just a little too light. Let's look at it a few times and see if that's what I like. I'm going to add a few more of these darker lines, the 08. Going back and forth as much as I'd like. I think I like where it's at, so I'm going to stop there. You've created a painting that only you could do. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun and relaxed a little. Next, you have some options. You can punch holes in this painting and add it to your sketchbook. You can frame it, you can gift it to a friend, and make sure to add it to our Facebook fan art page. I'd love to see it. Don't forget to check out the Nature Sketch Crate website at www.naturesketchcrate.com to shop for these lessons. Also, make sure to sign up for our newsletter for updates on future lessons.